Thank you. Yeah, today we're going to talk about sustainability. So we as platform co-ops, for us, it has shown that whatever it is that we are working on, that we are consulting on, is always linked to sustainability. And there is no business modeling, there is no foundation of new businesses today without really putting sustainability into the very center of things. And there are business models that are more obvious and others are less obvious. And we thought SuperCoop is like one of the obviously most sustainable startups. And I think there are so many aspects in terms of sustainability that SuperCoop covers. It starts from the actual form of foundation, the cooperative and members' involvement, to very specific steps that the organization has taken over the years to make sure that there is like a whole variety of sustainability measures in place. And maybe let's give everyone an overview of when SuperCorp has started and what was the original idea, and then we can hop into the actual sustainability. Marie, is that okay?
Sure. So we started end of 2018. So it's going to be almost 7 years to build the very first stones and steps, and basically doing a lot of, I think I met Robin, who is not anymore in the team, but was the first one to actually talk about the idea in Berlin at to make sense a boot camp back in the days. And this is also where I got in contact with Johanna. And a few months later, let's say 3 months later, we were around 10 to 15 people gravitating around co-op space in the Glogauer Straße. And there, we started working on the vision together. We started working on finding partners on how to talk about this idea in as many places as possible. Personally, for me, the journey started a few years before, because I met in Paris Tom Booth, who is the founder of La Louve, in Paris, and I was like, oh, that's an amazing idea. I'm sure this would work greatly in Berlin. And basically, this is only maybe 2 to 3 years later when I met Robin that I was very happily surprised to see that he was already starting talking about this in Berlin. So the idea was to build a community around food and to make an experiment, see how can we as a community redistribute the value, how can we propose an easy way of taking action to change at our small level the food system or the different food systems we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took us about 1 year to really work on the status. And we founded SuperCoop in October 2020. And 1 year later, end of September 21, we actually opened the first space, which is the actual space, but it was at the time a reduced space.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, our big model is the Park Slope Food Co-op, which was born in the 70s and still operates today with more than 17,000 members. They own the buildings, they can't expand anymore because there is no space anymore in Brooklyn. And back in the days, the context was very different, right? The context was the one of the food desert, really. There was no access to fresh fruits and vegetables, which is very different in Berlin, right? If you look at Berlin, we have like organic supermarkets at every other corner of the streets. So but at the same time, if you also look at the history of cooperatives, it's very interesting to see that as soon as there is institutional mistrust or a crisis, you see this kind of structure flourish. And for us, it was how to, yes, how to rethink ways of distributing food, how to avoid, the huge, I mean, we could talk for hours around all the challenges that are, embedded in all these value chains, all the climate, I mean, on the environmental side, but also on the social side, and also the social inequalities within these chains. And so for us, the main idea was to really try to find ways on how to redistribute this value differently. How can we partner with producers? How can we also create a benefit in for the consumers in Berlin, which is all the more challenging that the German market for food is highly competitive and that the culture around food is very much, I mean, let's say that German consumers are very price sensitive. So,
Yeah,
so yes.
yeah. I think what's really interesting, just based on the cooperative model as such, you already introduce structures of sustainability because all your members also live nearby. There is no member that lives really far away, except of some of the advisory board members. But in general, it's really the idea that you cater for the needs of the neighborhood, and that in itself is quite sustainable. Also, the way you organize participation, the way
Mhm.
you organize shared workload among members, all of this is really requires a certain sense of sustainability. When it comes to food production and food distribution and food sales, what would you say? What are your most important sustainability guidelines around food production and around food distribution?
Yes, so that was there were two fundamental steps at the beginning that also helped us mobilize members around these topics. The first one was the manifesto, which was clearly stating what we're here for, how do we want to actually I mean, which kind of transformation we wanna make. Um, and they this idea that as a supermarket, we'd like to flourish on transparent practices and move away from traditional retail methods. And also, of course, the central idea is that we're all co-owners and that we commit to democratically govern the supermarket and all have a say on the products and the distribution of profits. So there is like, I'm happy also to share this manifesto, which is, I
Yeah,
think,
I
big
was
long.
trying to look it up online, but I couldn't find it.
Yes, yes, and that that's one of the challenges is the communication, and we
Mm,
can talk about this later on. I will share the links with you. And the second step was building this sourcing guidelines,
mhm,
in which um, we um, we developed collectively, meaning around 10 people at the time. That was at the very beginning of the co-op when we started structuring the assortment. We had around 10 to 12 people working in the sourcing team, all voluntary, on a voluntary basis. And we drafted together a set of 10 guidelines going from, typical aspects like animal welfare or sustainable production methods, but also addressing waste and also addressing, which is actually our first guideline, the cultural and economic sensitivity for members and future members.
mhm,
Acknowledging that we don't want to be another organic supermarket with only premium products, but we also want to be economically affordable. So this is one pillar of accessibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because there are, of course, other ones in terms of participation and information. And so already within the guidelines, what we attempted to do was to embed also some kind of social definitions and social aspects within this sustainability word, which is kind of tricky to handle, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, as I said, I have to also, I have them here. I can also just share the link now in the Zoom. If you give me a second, I think that will be
That's
easier.
cool. Mm-hmm. Ah, yeah.
And we have, if you scroll down, you have the English version.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
from, of course, regionality, seasonality. So this is more like Absichtserklärung, as we would say in German. So
Your intention.
exactly. And of course, then the big challenge was how are we going to operationalize this, right?
Yeah.
And from there, and so maybe on the process first. So we did do a draft in this reduced committee, and then we presented in plenum.
Mm-hmm.
There were some comments, time for discussion. People raised some, like it was not consensual at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did organize a second work session that was open to anyone who wanted to join. So it took like two revisions until we actually submitted it and voted collectively these guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and so the question on how to operationalize this, of course, it has, so from these guidelines, there were some rules that we could derive kind of easily. I could give you examples. For example, there is the subsidiary principle. So whatever, we can find regionally, we first look regionally, and then we go to the next geographic
Mm-hmm.
zone. By the way, at the beginning, we didn't want to define regionality as it's normally defined along administrative structures. So
Mm-hmm.
we actually wanted to embed also a part of Poland because we thought, okay, come on, we are in the EU and we wanted to take like 200 kilometers perimeter. But we soonly, of course, not of course, but we soonly found out that it was very hard to implement because the whole system of all the wholesalers, of course, they're following these administrative structures. But we were, well, we don't anymore, but at some point we were working with also with Polish producers, and maybe it will also happen again in the future. So the subsidiary principle, I would say, is an important one. And an obvious second one was that we don't sell any, or we don't only sell regional organic meat. So meat being a very heavily loaded environmental product, we didn't want to sell any non-regional. We wanted to lower down as much as possible the impacts, right? There are also other challenges because you don't always have the information, or you find out that the so-called regional butchers, they also, there is a whole system behind. So as soon as we discovered that, we decided we don't sell fresh meat, apart from, like sausages and stuff that you can keep longer. So this kind of process of, you first have an intention and then you work in the subject and you find out that actually doesn't make sense. And of course, it comes as a trade-off with some economic, because in the end, we also have to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But on that, we never made a compromise onto that, right? So we decided for any kind of fresh meat that we sell, then at least we sell it over a pre-ordering system to make sure that we don't waste any of it. So that's,
Which brings me to a super important topic, and maybe we can also dig a little bit into that. Most obviously, one of the big issues in supermarkets is that there's a lot of food waste, and of course, there's also food waste at SuperCoop. And I know that a couple of years ago, this has been a far bigger topic than it is today. I think you have
Mhm.
all managed to to create a strategy that help you to reduce food waste. What's the role of food waste in like the overall loss of SuperCorp, and what did you do to yeah, to reduce it?
It's funny because it's one of the biggest topic. At the same time, for us, it was never really a central one because at the beginning, we had a margin system that did represented some kind of theoretical loss that we were expected. For
Mhm,
example, we were playing a 4 points margin more onto fresh products and expecting, especially for fruits and veg, a high level of loss.
mhm,
After a few years, when the topic of the margin came onto the table for other financial, reason you can all imagine, we decided to actually get rid of this system because the losses were representing less than 1% of what we buy.
mhm,
And I think it's a mix of different, it's very difficult first to have benchmark data. So all the documentation that you would find, especially from WWF on the topic, I think our rough estimates, but you can kind of find out after a few years of dealing with fruits and vegetables, looking at prices somewhere else, because mostly the prices of fruits and vegetables are based on sometimes up to 100% loss on salads, for example.
mhm, mhm,
So I think the first factor is the fact that members being co-owners are really and working in the structure, understanding, what it means to actually deal with fruits and vegetables.
mhm,
They get empathy for the krumme Gemüse, and end up buying these fruits and vegetables, even though I guess normally it's difficult because everyone has different criteria there.
mhm,
But it's very funny to see, when we leave the members decide what has to be dumped and what we can maybe reduce, discount a little bit. Some people are like, oh no, it's still fine, so I think it's um
mhm,
it's a process of people understanding that it's not because there is some soil on your carrots that it's bad. It's actually a good sign. Or it's not because you have insects in your salad that's
mhm,
it's bad. All the contrary, right?
mhm,
So that's definitely one aspect, getting out of this private property role, right? Is putting yourself in this collective mode and and working as a team. I
mhm,
think this is what made yes, definitely contributes to the low food waste. We have also great cold chambers, so we also invested in that. So it also means on the other end more energy costs. So we're coming back to these trade-offs the whole time.
mhm,
Um, and the fact of controlling the freshness, which is very difficult. I mean, if you work directly with producers, then when the products have been harvested. We work with two CSA, Solavi. One is Speisegut, the other one is Plant Age, and we know exactly when the produce has been harvested and delivered. So definitely, it's also stands for longer shelf life.
mhm,
Um, at the beginning, we also wanted to put some more stuff in place. Like, for example, there was this problem that sometimes Speisegut would tell us we have too much of Kürbisse or we have too much of that. So we were also communicating on that and say, okay, we take them, we will try to sell them. So there was also this partnership, and I think this is also one big rule that I wanted to talk about, is also the fact of not placing producers in competition and having this partnership approach. But
mhm,
finishing on the food waste aspect also, any member can follow the level of waste because because we're member based, and um, because we're member based, we can do very non-economic stuff, which is highly enjoyable sometimes, in a way that we have the time to really take good care of the fruits and veg. We have the time to weight everything that we give away or everything that we dump. And I think it's kind of a luxury that normal supermarkets don't, or maybe they're not interested into, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that data is available on the platform where members can register on the statistics page, so they can also follow in the big lines, month per month,
Mhm.
what is being wasted. So I
Yeah.
think also transparency and also bringing food waste as, for example, last Generalversammlung, I didn't make any point on food waste because in my head it was a non-issue anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that. This is,
But a
yeah.
member came with the question around food waste, and it was a good opportunity to
Mhm.
actually point out at this information, which is there since the beginning, but it's also very hard to maintain the communication and make sure that everybody knows where to find what.
Amazing. Yeah, this is super interesting, Marie. I just wanted to give people the opportunity to ask questions, because you might have something that interests you a lot about SuperCoop and what's going on there. So if you do have questions, thanks, Anne, for being here. Is there anything you would like to hear from Marie before I will move on with my questions? No? Andreas?
Yeah, I've just had this realization is around where co-ops and like those cooperative entities what we support, where they might be a good framework for economic collaboration and where they are not. That's like from a step back and over the course of the last 2 weeks where we have been at many Web3 conferences, like talking to agile and edgy founders and trying to pitch the cooperative model. And some of them I couldn't really discuss properly because they had a very strong stance on you need few founders or like groups that's steering even against the wall, and that's usually how you attract capital and how you do really innovative stuff. And what was kind of left for me, and what I also hear a lot from Marie's talk now, is that the co-op is not just protecting its members and the interests, but also taking out the competition to a certain degree. Because Marie, you mentioned that when those customers come in and say, okay, we don't have to throw this away, this is still good, I can take it. And so this is like the opposite from like when everyone bids the same price in a supermarket and then wants to have the best quality, where you max the competition, where you um yeah, you don't want to have the second best product, but like in the other version, when you are more in a collective spirit, then you might minimize the waste or the costs for the operations and so. And you also mentioned that you took out competition from the suppliers and so on. I wonder if you have more examples like, that are feeding into this theory that co-ops are not for so innovative business models. I'm not saying that SuperCoop is not, but it's a supermarket, right? It's not like a rocket science company. And on what level do you see more of those non-competitions, cooperations that actually, yeah, support your business model?
Can you reframe a little?
Yeah, it was a little bit long, but I needed that, I think. So yeah, I mean, where does cooperation happen even more in the benefit of your entity?
Thank you. Um, yeah, I think so. As I mentioned, we're trying not to follow the same rules. So when we do, it depends, of course. It's rules that are not the same for everyone. So for example, with wholesalers, we're kind of following the same rules, because we have no power to really. The only thing maybe that we change is that we are asking them for information that they might not be used to, for example. But with farmers, we are rather into this. Okay, what do you have? How can I help you? How can we? Because the idea is to create benefit for them and to create benefits for the consumers, right? So how do we close the loop? And so, for example, on the production side, the biggest challenge is the financial one, but also it's also the human resource one. Financial, because you need to pay in advance for production that is not here yet there. And on the human resources side, because you need people to sow and to harvest. So what we experimented, we do that only in the summer. We do create shifts on the field so that we are sharing basically our members with our producers, so that everybody is benefiting from it. For sure, the condition to be able to fulfill that is that we have enough members to actually fulfill the tasks that need to be fulfilled on site. And I think this is where it gets interesting, right? It's where it gets really circular. It's where you get into more Aufklärungsarbeit, so all this, stuff that is very hard to communicate on. And also where you go beyond the boundaries of your own company, right? Because often, especially when looking for funds, it's like, oh yeah, it's a nice system, but you're only working for yourself. But no, we're not only working for ourselves, right? We're also trying to make a difference on the small level, but still on the regional level, making sure that we're taking enough products from the producers, that we don't put them in competition, that we don't bring the prices down. And the basis for that is being very transparent and thinking together. The only problems to that is the time, and not only on our side, because we can make time, but on the producer side. And for that, you need people who really are super engaged, and this is the case with Christian von Speisegut, who is really like, even in the worst moment, able to get excited about a new idea. And so, and how to push that cooperation further. There are a few ideas in the room. None of them is being implemented right now because we have a big resource problem on the team side right now. So really, we're just able to maintain what is in place and not really expand. But an idea would be, for example, to share logistic structures. For example, as a Solavi, they have pickup points, and it's been in the room for some time, is how can we actually bring these communities together? So, and make sure that Speisegut we could benefit in getting more members. They could benefit also in getting more members and having a most attractive offer. So, and this is where we need, I think, a bit of help, because we have these ideas, but how to really structure them and formalize them and really make you were talking about agile, making how do you call that? A 2 weeks test round, and I think this is hopefully coming in 2026, because right now we're working on the new vision. What I'm talking about, the manifest and the sourcing guidelines, have been developed already a few years ago. So it's also the question of how to make sure that they are, it's not embedded in, how do you say, engraved in stone, but it's like living organisms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And around the corporations, I think there are many other examples that are not directly linked to the food sector, right? So it's also how to build corporations with other local associations, because in fine, the co-op belongs to everyone. So if everyone understands that that they can, do not whatever they want, but they can be, use the space to organize an event, be it a concert, being a lecture. The idea is really to build this collective, this community.
And here I have a
I don't know
question.
if I completely answered the question.
Yeah, it's
That
good.
I
It's good.
hope so.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to that, which interests me a lot. And that's the question of member activation, because as we all know, members are like the biggest sustainability resource that a cooperative can have. So I'm curious. You are now at around 1,800 members, and I know that the majority of them is actively taking on shifts in the supermarket. They are cleaning the toilets. They are working at the kasse. They do everything. There's no cheap labor at SuperCoop. So everything is done by the members. What is your strategy in order to make sure to keep these members activated? And what do you do with those that are inactive? Do you leave them behind, or do you have particular strategies to get back to them every now and then and nudge them? What's your way around member activation?
Yeah, that's a good topic, because this is right now the main challenge that we're facing, is that we keep on attracting new members, but we also saw that a few members are either passive active. There is some pattern of activity going on there, which might, we didn't mention that at the Generalversammlung, but it's been I think 4 months that the tram is not working. And I think this is one of the big reasons as well why we see that our numbers of active members is stagnating has been stagnating in the
Oh,
last
really? Because of
Yes.
public transport?
Public
Oh,
transportation, there
wow.
are like especially elderly people that I don't see anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, so there's plenty of stuff that we can do. The first thing that we do is calling members
Yeah.
and gathering feedback, qualitative feedback.
Uh-huh.
To understand first, is there a way that we can activate them again, but also to understand, okay, what did you drop? So in order to get some inspiration for strategies. Until now, the strategy has been to flexibilize the shift system. In a sense of allowing, for example, shift partner to share the shift. So instead of doing 13 shifts a year, you would do half of it. We have a lot of rules for different type of needs, and I think this will have to develop, and this for sure will develop along the way. So, but in order to understand these needs, we also have to create a way to a feedback structure that allows us to really understand these. So if you are in a situation of a member who can't come do the shift anymore for whatever reason, you can always come, and some people do, and then we find a solution on the spot. But if you're a person who doesn't dare doing that, because it also takes some a certain type of personality to say, hey, can we negotiate this? Which is
Yeah.
completely okay, right? Because in the end, a single model is not a fair model. So we definitely, over the course of the year, the model will have to further evolve. But right now, this is the first strategy that we are putting in place, is calling members. A second one that we are thinking of, especially for the members who we know are particularly dependent on this transportation system that doesn't work, would be to bring them to bring food, to bring the groceries to them. So we were also thinking of how to also address specific, specific people within our community. And I think, but a big next step is gonna be on the ABCD system. Sorry, it's a very for people and non-members it doesn't say anything, but we still have a shift system that is not so flexible, and I am pretty convinced, but I'm talking only in my name right now, that we need to make this more flexible. Because we have a double system, and I'm not gonna go into the details, but we have a very flexible system of people who can jump in, and we have like a fixed system. And the fixed system, when you're in, we kind of nudge the people to really choose this fixed system. Some of the shifts, they're a bit shorter. We also Yes, we also, for example, for team leaders, we also have a system where if they miss a shift, there is no consequence on the point system whatsoever. So we have these little nudges, but until now, I think they're not efficient enough. And it's a tricky conversation to have around the incentives, because at the last Generalversammlung, there was also some propositions around discounts for people who were particularly engaged. And there was, since the beginning of the COP, a lot of resistance around this topic of incentive and incentivization. So, especially when it comes to monetary incentive. And what we were always against this idea, because we didn't want to monetize the engagement, as we actually trying to get away from this value system and bring in another type of value system.
Yeah.
So I don't have a very clear-cut answer around that. I think, some people, for example, we have an amazing accounting team. I don't know why. I mean, these people have been there from the beginning. They're working every week and doing shifts on top because they want to. And as when you have like too many shifts, you can put them in the solidarity pot, so that people who are in need of a shift can take from the solidarity pot. So every member can take up to 2 shifts out of the solidarity pot, as long as there are shifts available.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, the most users of the solidarity pot are the flexible members, and the one who gives are the fixed ones.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
it also makes sense, because they can plan better, probably, right? They can accumulate more available hours than those who are chiming in. But
exactly.
I just wanted to say, it's really interesting what you said about incentivization. So there's research that clearly shows that whenever money is introduced in either, games or play, but also in social systems, it's not that money regulates intrinsic motivation. It's just on the contrary. It seems that very often, if money is introduced at a certain level, then it sort of disbalances activities and exchange. So there's really interesting research with kids where they are invited to play, and it's really about understanding how their intrinsic motivation works. And once you introduce money, they very often they stop playing this, because why is it? It's because they know something is expected from them. And I think the big question here is, when it comes to come up with a sustainable behavioral model where people can really commit to long term. I think it's about coming up with these positive things, and I think this solidarity shift model is a really good example where you open a space for people instead of confronting them with your own expectations, right? So I just wanted to comment on that, because I find that super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It would be interesting to make a session specifically dedicated around this topic.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I take.
Yeah.
What is interesting as well is that the members who take most responsibility as volunteers, so the team leaders, they're always there. I mean, we don't have We don't have absenteeism. How do you say absenteeism? I think it's
Yeah,
it's the
absentees
same.
or non-show up
No,
or
no show. We don't exactly. Thank you. We don't have a
yeah.
no-show problem there, and I think it really comes with this responsibility feeling, right? Because you have a team, so you let them know, and if you can't come, you find a solution.
Mhm.
So we are also
Mhm.
in these responsibility roles. We're trying also to build tandems to make sure that whatever extra responsibility you have is not
Yeah,
relying on your shoulders, but on the shoulders of two people.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I would say I think the problem is rather for the people who jump in and jump out on the flexible model. As soon as you don't have the team as the structure, the responsibility kind of fades away. I would assume that this is what's happening because at the beginning we had mostly the same number of fixed members and the same number of flexible ones. And over the course of the last 2 years, now we have much more flexible ones and we have more problems with no shows. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. There's a question from Nicolas, please.
Yes, thank you. So I'm speaking now more so from my also food co-op experience from Bern, and maybe want to challenge you a bit on what, or I see there like some tension in, like you said, that you think it's important to make it more flexible, like to shift sharing between multiple people, maybe moving away from these regular shifts. But at the same time, you say that making it more flexible creates more problems, more no-shows. And so me personally, I would say like the less commitment there is from members, the less identification, the less connection with the project or the initiative, and the less stable, the less um, yeah, chances for survival you will have. So it's rather how can we make these regular shifts more
Yes.
appealing to people
Exactly.
and like and or maybe explain better the way, or also flexible in a way that it's maybe not so difficult to not come or to change, to swap your shifts if you can't come, not moving away from that which builds the connection with the project.
No, definitely, you're right. And I think I didn't. I don't think what I said were completely contradictory. I think we need to find a level of engagement that is better suited to what can people bring, because the actual fixed system is too constraining. It involves like steps that are not really necessary or could make our lives much easier. And I think that's one aspect of yes, member engagement. Of course, for us, there is another aspect, but I'm not sure how interesting that is for the crowd tonight around the prices and all this, and this is also a big question, is how do we always maintain this balance between still having a model that, we still, so we have to be, we have to make profit in a sense of covering our costs. So we have to be financially sustainable. At the same time, we also want to build this social, this social and environmental added value while still moving ourselves within the capitalist system. So it's really, yes, I think it's really like try and adjust the process over time. Yes.
I can imagine that it's also the same when we talk about pricing systems, right? Because that's yet another very sensitive topic that regulates access to your products. And I also know that there is an ethos within SuperCoop that it's really about making sure that products continue to be accessible for members. This is like, it's obviously one of the primary sustainability measures. On the other hand, if you look at what's happening out there, You see a lot of, unverpackt Läden that just had to close in Berlin. I don't know if that's like a larger movement.
Mm.
And you see prices going up and inflation, etc., etc. And of course, you also feel the effect of it at SuperCoop. How thin is this balance for you of where you have the freedom to raise the prices, and how do you figure out when to stop? I imagine this is a very, very difficult approach. So what
Yeah.
can you share about that?
Yeah, I mean that's the most difficult part of this company. So what we're doing is benchmarking basically and making sure. I mean, if the point is just staying affordable, then everyone can go to Lidl or any discounter and find it, affordable products. So I think, we have to frame access in accessibility, but it's accessibility to also a certain quality, right? And that's the first and foremost idea, is that we want to bring quality food to people,
Yes.
most possibly from the region, from people we support mostly, while acknowledging that you know, we can't all afford to have this. I mean, in a logical world, we would have, of course, the most sustainable products would be actually cheaper because everything would be internalized. So it's, nowadays prices are so biased in by all means, that it's very difficult to, to find a model that makes sense. So for us, for example, we said at the beginning we don't do revenue management. Revenue management, you probably are you familiar? You're familiar with it, no?
Revenue management, I'm not familiar, no.
It's like revenue management is when you this I would s- that's my own definition, is when you either price according to demand, right? It's like everyone wants the or preference for time. We all know that from companies. If you want to take a train tomorrow, it will cost more, it will be more
Oh,
expensive
that, yeah.
than the train in 1 month. But also in the food sector, you have different margin applied to a same group of products.
Yeah.
Cheaper products will be much, or even sometimes, even though it's actually forbidden, they would be priced negative. They would have a negative margin onto these products because people look at milk price, they look at bread price and beer price, and from there on, they have their own mapping system going on. So first, what we said is we want to have a transparent pricing. We want everybody to understand where the money flows. And this is also why we try to also work with companies that are doing the same, not in the same way necessarily, but who have a true cost, at least in terms of being very transparent on how the cost is billed and how much they remunerate the people, for example, right? So it's not the majority of the products, but you can find such products at the SuperCoop. So that's the first thing about the transparency. And then we changed this. We had a unique margin at the beginning, and we changed last year because we were in a financial small crisis. We needed to increase our prices, and so we decided to make a differentiate margin, but based on rather ecological criteria. So we said, for example, okay, anything that is, high value products with a big footprint, like meat products, or like you can think about cheese, you can think about wine, which is non-necessary products. We priced them with a higher margin, whereas we kept the fruits and veg and the bread at the same margin to make sure that anyone can afford fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables. So
And
it's
I
a
guess also basics like
and also basics.
pasta, tomato sauce, like the
Exactly.
kitchen staples, right?
Exactly.
Can
And
imagine.
then on top of that, we have a solidarity prices
Mm,
on around 30 products, which are actually our best sellers. This is also where we're getting into, well, no, pardon, I'm thinking out loud, but this is basically the products that are bringing in itself the most money, but we decided to make them cheaper to make sure that anyone can have access to these products. And then what we also do is that whenever we take bulk products, we also make sure that we find one product that is still to build an incentive for people to buy bulk more than to buy packed products. So there are different cross strategies within the pricing strategy to make so, for example, for bulk products, we wouldn't take the most sustainable products because it would be too expensive
mm,
and it would probably end up producing more waste. But we actually mostly take German organic logo, which doesn't say much. But we make sure that whatever bulk we have is how to say it, the environmental and the economic incentives are kind of converging.
mhm,
And yeah, and what we did basically when we decided about this pricing system, we did a benchmark. Of course, then you have to check where you do your benchmark. So we did it at Dents and Bio Company. And the fact is, it was very difficult exercise because you never completely compare the same products. I mean, yes, for certain brands, it's very easy, but
mhm,
Dents for fresh and fruits and veg, it was almost impossible because they don't have almost no regional fruits and veg. So it's like comparing, it's very difficult to compare a regional salad with a salad that has been grown in, in a country, in a different country with very different policies.
Yeah, it's true. And now that you talk about it, there is a question comes up for me, and that's where do you learn all these things? I mean, you can't possibly learn that in your studies. I mean, this is like knowledge that is super important. How do you make sure to pass on that knowledge to members, and how have you developed this expertise in?
Yeah, I mean, on the price side is really just about experience and understanding how the market works. For some products, for example, it's very difficult to be cheaper because the market is so vertically concentrated that, we know for some product categories we will never be competitive, and we don't even want to start there because it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense, right? I think what maybe the different kind of thinking that we brought is where the way we structured the assortment along you recognizing that we have over 4,000 products. We can't have the same scrutiny when looking at the sustainability criteria for each and every product. So the first question was, how do we reduce this complexity? And this question is even more important when it comes to transmission and communication and
Yeah.
and aligning people.
Mhm.
And so what we decided there would be three levels of qualities. There would be the C quality, which is we don't look at almost any criteria other than we make sure the products doesn't come from overseas, but it's conventional and it shouldn't be more than 20% of our products. And for that, actually, I think today it's like 10% of our sales or something like that, and less than 20% of the products. Then we have the B category where we only look at certifications. And then there is a category where we look at different set of criterias along different value chains. So it involves developing a code, a policy code and understanding what kind of value chains are in place, what are the ones that we want to support, what are which criteria come in play when we talk about coffee, for example, or I'm taking coffee because we know that it's a very sensitive one, right? So,
Mm.
and this has been at the beginning done collectively. So, for example, Ella, you would do the coffee, so you would be the coffee researcher. There was a there is a small procedure on how to do that research, and there are specific criteria that have been defined for these product categories. So yeah, I could go on and go on this topic, which is very vast, but the complexity comes then when you have members. So we have a system in which members can also provide ideas for suppliers, and so the solution we found was to have database in a form of a form for members that they can fill in, and they already do half of the job, right? So they already collect all the information about, so why is this company interesting? Where is it located? What kind of criteria does it fulfills, and all this stuff. And so it's a way for us to kind of keep up the work, so to say, in the team, but also to inform members, because then it also means they can see also what are the criteria of the produce, which criteria will come to the producers. The complexity comes when members make product wishes, and we have a lot of this. And it becomes very hard to manage the size of the assortment and to make sure also that these criteria are being fulfilled. And so right now we're also trying to set new ideas, also with a new Arbeitsgruppe, working group working around these product wishes. And it's the next step of how to actually build a system that that is sustainable over the long run, and that is not taking too much of our capacity to maintain. So how to transmit this information and to transfer it is a very good question. I mean, I think and that's kind of the biggest shortfall of the co-op, is if you enter the SuperCoop, you don't see all that. You don't, and so there is a big need of communication. There's some, it's also the challenge of working with volunteers, is that there is like one piece of work that is done, maybe 90%, and then there's no one to actually bring it to the final stand. So there's still, still a lot of still, I think the work that we want to do around the governance of the co-op, and making sure that the working groups are actually, that we're all working towards the same goals, is very much gonna facilitate this, hopefully solve part of these challenges.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, if all the practices that have been co-developed, all the standards and guidelines that also members have helped to co-develop, to really make sure that this knowledge is being equally distributed and made accessible also for those that come in at a later stage. That's quite a thing. Yeah, I can totally imagine. Andreas, please.
Yeah, listening to Maria, I was wondering at what point the SuperCoop needs to train an own AI model or an agent, because like all those analysis around like the sourcing, where are the products from, and what food trays do they leave, paired with like wishes for new products. I mean, that's opening up like three-dimensional chess matrices, as they call it. It's like it's really complex, and nobody can ever like run it. But maybe AI can do it. Plus, doing the job to communicate this to those individual members. It's probably just like a morning exercise for an AI, and who knows what that unlocks? Because as Ella says, you have compiled quite some knowledge, and maybe it's even a very great module that can offer service to other groups of people and supermarkets who want to, base their sourcing on this new business model.
Great point.
Indeed. Let's try let's see what AI. I think there was a little I think Jess, who is like now coming in the board, she applied to an AI. So we also looked at, okay, where AI could help us, and that was also a big. It was all about a big part around the sourcing and the communication around these points. Yeah, what I find interesting in the end is how can we communicate around trade-offs, because it's not about having the best system, it's about having pardon, not the best sustainable, the most sustainable
Yeah, yeah.
supermarket.
Yeah.
It's about this collective contract that we're doing with
Yeah.
each other,
Yeah.
and understanding and allowing us to make better informed food choices. And the information is scattered and among so many different places. There is no single one system that allows us to know that this tomato is not being grown with illegal waters or with migrants, in human, you know what I mean? Is like there is no uniform system that exists. So I think it's how can we build a value system that is open and democratic and understandable by all, while making sure that we're not, damaging, creating, avoiding, of course, that we are creating damages out of,
Yeah.
lack. I mean, it's a tricky issue. Most of the time when I ask questions, I don't get fully complete answers, on the sourcing end.
Yeah, I can totally imagine.
Yes.
Nicola, you have a question, please.
Yes, well, it relates to this last aspect, but regarding information from suppliers and to sustainability, but not so much the ecological side, but the social side. And we in Bern, we struggle a lot with obtaining information about working conditions.
Yeah.
And actually, and that's, I find this, I didn't expect that when I started doing research about this and contacting suppliers, that you can know how much square centimeters and like a chicken has to get a certain label, but the suppliers will not share information about working conditions, especially salaries, and which is basic, to be fair and sustainable, and to put this label on your brand. Not sharing this information, I find this this is just not okay. But somehow th they find that this is intrusive. We were called this is private and we are not sharing this information. And so how do you deal with have you had similar responses? Or
No, we had so there is one case where we decided not to work with the company anymore. It was basically a company that had been suggested by a member, and if you would go on the site, it was already looking very much like a VC fed company. And so we actually never got clear answers, and we decided to stop working with them. So as to be honest, most of the time it's very difficult to have this kind of information. When especially about global supply chains, thinking about products coming from overseas, especially in regions where yes, there's a lot of inequalities and poverty. So I know that there are some solutions out there, especially with the blockchain, that have been looking at this intermediated way of providing information. I don't have a solution for that. When we get the information that we don't get it, then we don't work with them. But there is I don't have a better answer than that, unfortunately. And I hope that the neue Lieferkettengesetz will bring some, improvements on that end. I think it has been verschoben to, delayed by a year.
Yeah.
But I think, I hope it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Andreas, please.
Yeah, Marie said it already. I was just thinking about the Lieferkettengesetz as well, supply chain law, whatever, and wanted to know like what's the product that has like the longest way to travel before it is placed in the supermarket, and how does it relate to Lieferkettengesetz? Like, what are the main takeaways from this? Like, can you basically buy everything you want, even though it's from like the end of the world, but then it's needs to be declared like this, or are there some, no-goes, or yeah, how does that come together?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the co-op, I think the product that comes the most farther away are bananas and limette, which are basically and coffee. So we have a few products from overseas, which we deliberately we have a small number of these products. And yeah, I mean, I think, it's always the trade-offs, like, should we not sell bananas because it comes from overseas? It's also, is it democratic? Then we come back to this. So we decided we keep the bananas. And well, I think the main consequence for us will be able to make much more informed decision, and to be able to really have a good, because there, I mean, of course, we can't discuss around each and every products at the co-op, but there are some, there's some discussions that already happened in the past. We have some blacklisted companies we don't want to work with, and these are, for different reasons, like the ones that work with Danone, for example, Nestle, for pretty obvious reasons, and we, as soon as you have the information, that you can definitely, collectively decide around this. And we could even, think of having like some small committees that would make propositions and find a very easy system on voting yes and no, and that's it, and then it's done. So I think the major impact is gonna be having access to the information, and making sure that we're not sustaining a system that is lethal, or exploiting.
Yeah,
Yes.
I also feel like I really want to share something that I have recently discovered, and this is also, it's another aspect to Andreas' questions about which product travels from afar. So have you all seen the Pink Lady apple? Have you met Pink Lady in one of the supermarkets? So I have to say I have sort of noticed the sticker that all these apples have, but I never did any research on that. I just didn't buy them because obviously they are not organic. So I just walked past. But then at a certain point, I was invited to give a talk about the impact of a cooperative product and an industrialized product, and also the, what it actually costs in terms of sustainability factors. And then I have learned, to my big surprise, that Pink Lady is a club apple, meaning it's an apple that comes with standardization and trademark regulations, because all the farmers that grow this Pink Lady apple, they are part of a global club, and yeah, there's really heavy trademark standardization around it, and the whole trademark is being controlled by a limited in Australia. And of course, this apple travels from South America or South Africa. There are several farms in these two regions. And when you just compare the footprint that these two products have, like a product that I can get from SuperCoop, where I can trust, okay, this is regional, this is organically grown, and hopefully it's also working conditions and everything are in a way that just feels safe for me as a consumer. It's so crazy because I brought two apples with me to the presentation, and they look almost similar, you know. I mean, but the story they tell about the future is a completely different one. And also they're, you know, the way Pink Lady is carbon heavy is so incredible compared to, you know, an apple that is grown here in the surroundings. And they even, you know, there's not even a trade-off in terms of taste. So the big question I have, and this is related to what you say about knowledge, right? How can we get better in informing customers about this terribly wrong choice to buy this apple? And even if it might be cheaper, but the costs are tremendous for it, right? So I really got upset when I made this clear for myself that products like that are dominating the markets more and more, because in all the discounters you get the Granny Smith or Pink Lady apples, and everything else that just grows right in front of our doorstep doesn't make it into the shelves. I find this this gives me like you know, I really get upset about it, I have to say.
Yeah, there are these interesting concepts of virtual water or virtual resources, right? That I was kind of fond of some years ago when I first discovered around this. I mean, because you can of course talk about life cycle assessment and get your nose into the crazy you know, studies that compares the sustainability of imported apple from Chile in the summer month or a stored refrigerated apple during 10 months, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah,
I
I know
mean,
that study.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Mm,
So you can, you know, I think you can get into that, but I think this it's much more telling to talk about like this, use this virtual resources concept to show, you know, to show the all the resources that are embedded, you know, into
yeah,
these products.
yeah.
And I mean, there are some obvious stuff that we can do. For example, seasonality is one. Another one is saying, okay, we don't import anything by air freight. You just ban it. And this is something that is pretty easy to implement and to communicate about. But then the tricky part comes where, you know, you see each product as an individual and, you know, product that has different specificities that belong to different value chain. And it's impossible to communicate on each and every product. I mean, it would drive us crazy, right?
Yeah,
And this is why, as much as the collective is also more interesting than the individual, I really like this idea of communicating on the value chain, because then you also bring this value, which you can also twist with the, you know, what you were mentioning, the trust. In the end, you know, it's all about changing the eye we have and about around food. One example is that we met a guy who's been a hobby apple grower. He took over a field of apples that had been managed conventionally for years and then abandoned for 20 years. And he just did that for fun. So he would bring us apples I had never heard the name of, you know, from Brandenburg. And of course, they were like full of, you know,
well,
holes and animals. And they would cost like €1 the kilo, or what, maybe this year they were, no, this year was a terrible apple year, so we didn't get any this year. But he also does this amazing juice. And I think, you know, by seeing the stuff already, people start like questioning their
yeah.
you know, their love for perfect looking apples. Or also there is a very good tomato example with the tomato from Israel that prevents it from aging.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, like these terrible
Mhm.
examples.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, on the storytelling side, maybe that's a good kind of final word. There is this Botany of Desire. It's a very great book that look at domestication of different. There is one chapter around on apples,
Mm-hmm.
and that's I have to check who's the author. He's an American, Michael
Michael
Pollan. Yeah.
isn't that also the guy who
On psychedelics, he's like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Ah,
and
interesting.
it
Uh-huh.
was it's a beautiful book because it's just a switch of perspective on the apple that is domesticating us and not the contrary, on
Oh,
bring
yeah.
some sugars and to make us addicted, and I think
Mhm.
it's a interesting twist maybe that can inform also a narrative twist.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. Nicholas, please.
Yeah, just one thought regarding AI and information and making this accessible. What we also in Bern have been thinking about, which would be great. So if Andreas or somebody else would know of people in that domain, to have for the products kind of, I think it's called a radar chart, where you could put these different dimensions. You can have that for political positions, where you can see where people are situated, but you could have these different dimensions, and then you could see with one site like how the product does on different dimensions,
Mhm.
how
Like a
bad or good it's
materiality.
how good or bad it scores. And so you
Mhm.
could have the two products next to each other, and you could see and then you could see this is good on a social level, this is good on an ecological level. Well, for me this dimension is more important, so I buy the socially sourced product. And so
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to because in the end the people still buy the individual product.
Hmm.
And it's good to have the information about the individual product too, but it's very hard to communicate or to gather the information first and then to communicate this.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It is simply because all this information is not so easily accessible.
Mm.
Then, like Pink Lady, they have the budget to market their products very heavily, whereas, the local apples don't have that. And also, it's like, the way they are presented with this stupid sticker, it really speaks to children, because I have noticed that, that because, I only got, I I realized that when my daughter declared her preference for Granny Smith apple, because this is an apple that that tells a certain story. It's obviously it is very crunchy, and this is like the marketing thing, and it's not even better than another apple, but it's just like the marketing. And the problem is that there is no school subject that teaches them that they should question all those choices, right? So I'm just afraid that people will have to learn this the hard way, because at some point, this all of this doesn't make any sense. But that even more shows how important your knowledge is, and all the knowledge you have accumulated within SuperCoop with all the members. And yeah, I really want to thank you for your generous sharing of all these insights from SuperCoop. And I also hope that when you pass on the baton to another team that follows after you, after almost 6 years, right? No, 5 years.
Yes, almost seven, almost. I mean, full time
Oh yeah, yeah,
less, but yeah, in total 7. Yeah. Mm.
amazing. Yeah, so that they find good ways to sort of keep the knowledge and grow it and distribute it among everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a big question in the daily life. There is almost no time to actually write all these things down. Um, But yeah, Nicolas, I'm happy to share these, questions and ideas, which took a big chunk of the 2 first years. And then I was working at, 1,000 of stuff. Um, and so I think now is a great time to actually
Yeah.
have a boost moment on all these topics that are so important. And I think also defining what sustainability means for the cooperative, and that making sure that these guidelines are being enriched, right, by the members. I started with accumulating a lot of knowledge, writing it down in organizing everything in databases, and some of them I haven't opened in some time now. So I'm sure I can. And there was this idea of doing a monthly meeting on a specific value chain, so open to everyone, and that's something that maybe we could do, or I could do as a member, even though afterwards. I also have to think of the way to further contribute. Yes.
Yeah, Marie, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation with you and learned a lot. All the little hearts are emerging. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Small request for those that are still around. We would love to get your feedback, because kindly ask you to just click on this link and just let us know. It's super quick, but just let us know what you liked about this conversation and what maybe we could do better next time. So calling everybody just to leave a brief message. And Marie, thank you again. Thanks everyone who joined us, and I wish you a wonderful evening.
Yes. Good evening to everyone.
Soon.
And Claudia, I will reach out because I have a specific question for you. Yeah, cool.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you
Guys,
for
very much.
organizing, and Marie for the presentation.
Thank you, Marie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.